Welcome back to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic. The Kitchen Table series returns, our longest running content series, this time with deck tech number 69. And in today's video, we're going to talk about Izzet Draw 2. What's up, MTG BC, baby? That is the MTG Burgeoning community. Welcome back to another episode of the Kitchen Table series. We are up to deck tech number 69, and in today's video, we're going to talk about Izzet Draw 2. As generally is the rule of thumb during the Kitchen Table series, let's begin with the mana base. It's going to be a pretty straightforward, no thrills, chills, or spills. We've got Izzet colors, so we've got 10 basic islands, and we've got 10 basic mountains. That is all, folks. There are no steam vents. There are no sulfur falls. We're playing with 10 basic islands and 10 basic mountains, and that's going to be all for the mana base. We are not even going to play a Soul Ring, if you can believe the blasphemy coming from MTG Burgeoning. So, Izzet Draw 2? What we're looking to do here is we want to take advantage of any time and every time we draw a second card in any turn. So how we're going to do that is, let's lay out the cards that are going to help us win the game whenever we benefit by drawing at least 2 cards in a turn. The first is going to be Fairy Vandal. It's a 1/2 flyer with flash for 1 and a blue, and whenever we draw our second card each turn, this gets a +1/+1 counter on it. Later on in this deck tech, you're going to see the number of spells that are going to allow us to draw that second card, and that's going to make Fairy Vandal very big, very quickly, and a great evasive threat to our opponents. 4 copies of Fairy Vandal. Speaking of evasive threats for our opponents whenever we draw a second card in a turn, a full playset of Improbable Alliance. This enchantment comes into play for Izzet colors, and whenever we draw our second card each turn, we create a 1/1 blue fairy creature token with flying. There's also the overcosted late-game mana sink of paying 4 in Izzet colors to draw a card and then discard a card. It is my hope that we will never need to utilize that ability in any of the games we play with this deck. 4 copies of Improbable Alliance as we are beginning to shape the battlefield with all kinds of flying nuisances for our opponents. Sometimes having those small evasive creatures are nice, and other times we want to do that damage straight to the face of the person sitting across from us, diagonally, to the right, or to the left. Well, including a playset of Ironcrag Pyromancer will allow us to do that. This human wizard is a 0/4 for 2 and 1 red mana. Whenever we draw our second card each turn, Ironcrag Pyromancer gets to lightning bolt anything she wants. 4 copies of Ironcrag Pyromancer because we can't play with 20. And lastly, this is our last playset of Draw 2 payoffs. And it's in the deck because of what it can do, but it might be in the deck a little bit more for its name, because I just love the fact that there's a card in Magic called Mad Ratter. And if you can't share this love with me, then what's wrong, witches? There's a card in Magic called Mad Ratter, and we need to talk more about it. It's a goblin with a body of 1/2 for 3 and 1 red mana, so it's a little bit overcosted on the CMC for just a 1/2 body. However, whenever we draw our second card each turn, we're going to create 2 1/1 black rat creature tokens. So these dudes don't fly, they don't have Death Touch, they don't have Swamp Walker Menace, but we're going to flood the board with some rats pretty quickly if we can get Mad Ratter out onto the play without any level of interaction. 4 copies of Mad Ratter. You're thinking to yourself right now, that is an awesome name for a Magic card. Come on, MTG BC. Give it to me in the comment section, baby. Mad Ratter is a card in Magic the Gathering. Come on, baby. We need to talk more about the Mad Ratter. All right, so You've seen some of the payoffs that we're going to benefit when we draw that second card each turn. However, this is Magic, and we only get to draw one card at the beginning of our turn, so we got to include a bunch of spells and abilities and effects that are going to allow us to draw that second card. Or, in some instances, a third card, or cards during our opponent's turn, because that's really going to be the key. None of those preceding 16 spells that we were talking about, the 12 creatures in the playset of Improbable Alliance, none of those spells or effects indicated that we needed to draw that card on our turn. It just says whenever you draw your second card each turn. With that being said, let's talk about our first playset, Brainstorm. Instant speed, 1 blue mana, we draw 3 cards, then put 2 cards from our hand on top of our library in any order. We definitely want to make sure we hit this during one of our opponent's turns so that we can activate one of the abilities that we talked about already. 4 copies of Brainstorm. Next up, this is a great way to draw that second card during our turn, and that's 4 copies of Merfolk Looter. The awesome Merfolk Rogue, it's a 1/1 for 1 and a blue. We tap it to draw a card, and then we discard a card. So this is on our turn. We're going to draw a card for turn. We're going to turn Merfolk Looter sideways, and that will be card number 2, and then we're going to activate our abilities. Hopefully we've got Mad Ratters in play, or we've got our Fairy Vandal. Either way, Merfolk Looter is going to help us to draw that second card during our turn. 4 copies of the Merfolk Looter. Next up, going back to instant speed for Izzet colors, of course it's going to be Izzet Charm. It's a blue, it's a red. We get to pick one of the following 3 modes. Either we counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 2. Yeah, I'm not a proponent of counter magic, so it seems very unlikely that I will ever choose mode number 1. Mode number 2 says deals 2 damage to target creature. That could be an acceptable mode, particularly if there's some kind of troublesome or problematic creature on the battlefield. That has got to go. So we can definitely invest those Izzet colors into offing a creature with a 2 power or less. But more importantly, mode number 3 allows us to draw 2 cards and then discard 2 cards. So again, this is one of those spells that we want to target casting during one of our opponent's turns so that we can trigger our draw 2 cards per turn abilities. 4 copies of Izzet Charm. All right, next up, ticking up to a mana value of 3. We're going to play with a full play set of Mirrodin Besiege. It's an enchantment for 2 and a blue mana, and when this ETBs, we choose either Mirren or Phyrexian. If we choose Mirren, then whenever we cast an artifact spell, we're going to create a 1/1 colorless mirror artifact creature token. Don't select Mirren. There are no artifact spells in this deck. Don't select Mirren. This is in this deck because of the Phyrexian mode, which reads at the beginning of our end step, we draw a card and then discard a card. Then if there are 15 or more artifact cards in our graveyard, target opponent loses the game. Again, there are no artifacts in this deck, so that losing the game clause is not going to be applicable for this deck. What we need to focus on is Mirrodin Besiege's ability to let us draw that second card during our turn, albeit it's at our end step, but we still get that second card and it still will trigger all of our draw 2 effects. 4 copies of Mirrodin Besieged. All right, next play set, we are going to cram 4 copies of the Royal Scions into this deck. Set of Planeswalkers for 1 in Izzet colors. It comes down with 5 loyalty counters, and we can +1 the Royal Scions to draw that second card during our turn, and we also discard a card. We can also +1 the Royal Scions to give target creature +2/+0 and first strike and trample until end of turn. Let's be honest, because of the way in which this deck is being constructed, the Royal Scion's first ability is going to be its most popular ability. And if we can tick the Royal Scions to 8 or above, we can take off 8 loyalty counters to draw 4 cards, and when we do, the Royal Scions deal damage to any target equal to the number of cards in our hand. that could be a fantastic finisher against one of our opponents because it can go straight to their face. The Royal Scions is another one of those cards that will help to ensure that we can draw the second card during our turn. 4 copies of the Royal Scions. All right, so much of what we talked about is drawing that second card, and so many of the spells that we've included in order to do that at times are forcing us to discard a card or to discard 2 cards. Merfolk Looter makes us discard a card. Mirrodin Besieged makes us discard a card. The Royal Scions makes us discard a card. And Izzet Charm makes us discard 2 cards. So as long as we have these force effects that we have to, we have to make sure that we discard these cards to, why don't we include another benefit to what this deck is trying to do? If we're triggering all of our draw 2 spells and effects by these effects that force us to discard cards, why not include something that will help us to win the game quicker when we discard those cards? Enter a full playset of Glinthorn Buccaneer. It's a Minotaur Pirate for 2/4 for 1 and 2 red mana. It has haste and reads, whenever we discard a card, Glinthorn Buccaneer deals 1 damage to each opponent. We don't have to invest any mana to do this. We don't have to tap Glinthorn Buccaneer to get this effect. It's whenever we discard a card, Glinthorn Buccaneer will deal 2 damage to each opponent. So imagine casting an Izzet Charm at the end of our last opponent's turn, and we discard 2 cards, and Glinthorn Buccaneer deals 2 to each of our opponents, and then we get to untap and reap more benefits from any of the potential fairies we created from Improbable Alliance, or maybe some more +1/+1 counters for Fairy Vandal, or imagine if we had an Iron Crag Feeder 2 out there, doing a Lightning Bolt to wherever we want. But we're not done yet. We can pay 1 and a red mana to activate Glinthorn Buccaneer's activated ability, which lets us discard a card, and then we can draw a card. We can only activate this ability if Glinthorn Buccaneer is attacking. So as a last resort, we can use this Minotaur Pirate to make sure that we can get a second card drawn during our turn, as long as we have a card in our hand to discard as part of its activated ability. Either way we spell it out, Glinthorn Buccaneer really takes the gold ribbon and wraps it around the package that is this deck, and it synergizes with what we're doing absolutely perfectly. 4 copies of Glinthorn Buccaneer. All right, there you have it, MTGBC. The Kitchen Table series continues to steam forward. This was Deck Tech number 69. Let me know your thoughts about this deck in the comment section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic.